Hi and welcome back to another of our video blogs. My name's Jerry Devine and I'm a trainer and practice management consultant with Thornfields Training and First Practice Management. And today I'm here with Phil Harnby, who is the healthcare group manager with accountancy firm RMT, who specialise in GP practice accounts. And I'm going to be discussing with Phil the contractual requirement which was introduced at the beginning of the 2015-16 financial year for practices to publish average earnings of their GPs by the 31st of March 2016. A number of the questions I'll be putting to Phil have been submitted by practice managers, and our hope is that this video will give practice managers some background to this requirement, as well as some practical understanding of what they need to do and by when in order to comply. So it's a warm welcome to Phil, and thanks for sparing some time to help us with this. So the first question is, I'll begin with a fairly fundamental question. Why are practices having to publish these figures?
I think it's one of those interesting questions, Jerry, that there probably isn't a real answer to. The NHS England and the BMA sat down a while ago now to talk about how they were going to dispel the myth that all GPs earn just over £250,000 while playing golf for the rest of the week. And we all know the reality definitely isn't that, but the general perception from the public that potentially that it is. So what they decided is that they would sit down and come up with what are the actual figures that GPs are earning from their contract to try and dispel those myths.
Can I follow on from that, and just for my benefit and your average practice manager, could you just give a simple explanation of how these figures are calculated? In particular, what revenue is included and what possibly is excluded?
Yeah, most practices are turning to their accountants to pull these figures together, and obviously we're doing that for our own clients, but within the actual, and I've got a copy of the BMA guide to the contract, there's actually several pages within that talk about what is included and what is excluded, and it goes on for 4 pages. There's a fair amount of stuff that's in and out. The predominant trend is, though, that it's mainly just national contract figures. So the main contract figures, any nationally directed enhanced services, so nothing of the local stuff, but then it also doesn't include any property type income or dispensing if you're a dispensary. So it is really important that practices and their accountants pay attention to that table of information that's within the contract to understand what should and shouldn't be included.
Okay. Are there any common themes as to what is included and what's excluded?
There's no specific common theme at all. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. It talks about things that you shouldn't include any premises income and the premises expenditure, which kind of allows you to differentiate if you're a property owning practice or a non-property owning practice. So it makes it more comparable. And the same with dispensing. You don't include the dispensing elements of it, so that dispensing practices can be separated out from non-dispensing practices. And then beyond that, it's the national services, so things like the QOF, that's definitely in there. Your global sum is definitely within there. It does allow you, though, to apportion expenditure, so you're not going to include any non-NHS, any non-main contract income, so if you're doing medicals and reports and things like that, you can exclude that completely. But it also then allows for and requires you to then apportion your expenditure. So if all of your practice income is, say, 99% practice-based part of the contract and 1% is private, you exclude 1% of your expenditure.
What impact on the number will result from the fact that all GP earnings are treated as if they were all full-time?
Yeah, the calculation isn't using maths particularly well, in the sense of, and the best way to explain this is through an example. So if the calculation comes through that the practice as a whole has profits of £100,000, if you have one full-time partner and no other salary GPs or locums or any other partners, then the calculation is £100,000. That's made clear in the examples that are in the contract. However, if you have 2 part-time GPs, you just class them as a partner, the same as we're counting our full-time GP. So the profit may still be £100,000, but actually the answer on your website and the figure that has to be published is the £50,000. Okay. So it's fairly unfair if you're a small numbered practice using full-time partners.
Okay, thank you. And just tell me how this calculation will treat locums.
Yeah, locums, they say that Specifically, it follows the rules of the pension, NHS pensions from this point of view. If they're in the practice for more than 6 months, you class them as if they're a salaried GP and include them in the statistics in that basis. Less than 6 months, you don't include them. It does, however, also raise a very simplistic question with regards to HMRC, in that long-term locums aren't allowed from HMRC purposes and should be treated as employees. So you've got to be really careful around having locums that length of time anyway, and that you're not only complying with these rules but also complying with the requirements of HMRC and pay-as-you-earn and national insurance.
Okay. I'm sure some practice managers will have GPs say to them things along the lines of, why don't these figures look anything like my tax return or my pension certificate? How would you help them deal with such questions?
Yeah. Most of our clients have asked us the exact same question. These figures are coming out disproportionately low to where most GP partners and practitioners are earning, so there isn't going to be much comparison. The main reason being is it's excluding all that other income. Mm-hmm. So some of those services, all of that private income, it's going to be nothing like what's going to sit against your actual tax return or your superannuation certificate.
Thanks. Are you aware of any intention to extend this approach to the salaries of any other members of the practice team?
It's an interesting rumour, and I doubt it'll come to fruition. I think they're mainly looking at the contract providers, but one could argue that certainly it doesn't include nurse practitioners, so they certainly are delivering clinical care. It doesn't include nursing staff as well, or healthcare assistants. It doesn't include the senior management team of a practice. But it's going back to that original question as to why this was set up. What value would that add to the patients, and to dispel the myth that doctors are being paid too much? I can't see it happening, but I wouldn't bet the farm on it.
I know this number has to be published on the practice website, but what happens if the practice doesn't have a website? For example, maybe it's only got a Facebook page. And also, is there any requirement to publish it elsewhere?
Yeah, the contract talks about it having to be published on the practice's website, and in fairness, most practices now have a website, and it might be a good opportunity to now set one up. They are fairly reasonable to do so, but at the same time, it doesn't specifically say what your website has to be. So if your website is a Facebook page, that is the practice's website. So if you feel that's allowable within the remit of what you've got to do from an online access point of view, then that's each individual's practice's decision. It's just got to be on that website, and then beyond that, it's also got to be available in hard copy should you have patients that aren't able to access the website or don't have access to an internet connection. The contract does, however, go in to say that can just be as easy as showing them on a computer screen in the practice. So you don't have to have a load of hard copies behind the reception desk. It's just that if patients inquire, they should be able to be shown it.
Okay. Thanks for that. What, if any, is the penalty for non-compliance?
Well, like a lot of elements of the contract, there's no specific part of it which says that this will be penalised by doing X, Y, or Z. What it is quite clear is, though, it is part of the contract. So if you don't do a particular part of that contract, you are technically in breach of the contract. Whether or not NHS England would come down heavy-handed on any individual practices for not doing this, I think it would be exceptionally rare if they did, or unusual. But you know, they would have a valid point that you've breached the terms of the contract. So I think it would be probably unwise not to do a requirement of the contract.
Okay. And finally, Phil, what does next year hold?
Next year, the idea is that we'll start producing figures that allocate to an individual. So instead of just having, and what you're required to do this year is have on the average per the whole practice, so the average profit, and then a list of the full-time individuals, part-time, and the number of salaried GPs that make up that figure. Next year you're going to have actual, or supposedly have actual people's names and the number that sits next to them. So it's become much more personal and probably more contentious because of that.
Okay. So again, thanks for your time, Phil, and thanks for those of you who are viewing for investing time in watching this clip. And so until next time, it's bye from me. Bye for now.